What is up, guys? I am back for the first time in a long fucking time. Starting with a kind of new format for the series. Now that we've moved and we're in Vegas, I have like a 30-minute drive one way to the gym. So I figured, hey, why not just do the whole Sam Sulek routine and get some yapping in while I'm driving to the gym. So that's what we're going to do. Today's topic is I don't really have one. I'm just going to kind of rant. As many of you know, I have been away from social media for a minute. Not like on purpose, not really with the intent of being like, oh, I'm not, trying to be on social media. I'm trying to take a break, all that stuff. It's just social media is time consuming. Always has been, always will be. And it's not always necessarily the most productive use of my time. So I have been focused on my clients for coaching, my own bodybuilding, and getting things going in the right direction. So on that note, with the bodybuilding and kind of with how everything is going right now, I am down to a shockingly low 208 pounds, thereabout, give or take a couple points there. And it feels great. We are pulling back a little bit right now just to get me primed for growth again. Peak weight for this last growth phase was about 229 pounds, I think. Just shy. It was like 228.6, 228.8, something like that. And that felt good. That was the best I've felt at that body weight. Obviously, it's not a crazy high body weight just yet. Right now, again, only 20 pounds below that, but we've come down 20 pounds in about 4 weeks. So great rate of loss there. Really excited to get back into growing and should be getting there soon. Probably within the next month or so, we'll get back to growing till probably end of February, end of March, and then assess where we're going from there with the show. Potentially going to be doing a show in July if things look right and we feel good about it. If we want to put on a little more size or just take some time to correct some health markers, just kind of basically depends on how this growth phase ends, this next upcoming one. We may do a show in July, we may do a show in the October to December timeframe of next year, 2025. So that is kind of where I'm going to be. That projected show is probably in light heavies, probably somewhere around the low 190s, high 180s as far as stage weight is concerned. So we're just going to kind of see how it plays out over the next, number of months growing and kind of go from there. So today is going to be a push session. I should say push. It's a chest focused push session, but it is still a push day. I do still have shoulder work and tricep work on this day. It's not just chest alone. So now that I'm dieting, a question I get asked by a lot of my clients who keep up with my own progress, or even just friends of mine who I communicate to and, are also into bodybuilding or into the gym in general. Some of them aren't really that competitive, but they do still like to hear and understand it. They ask me, now that you're dieting, now that you're in a deficit, even though it's just short term, how has your training changed? And my answer is, it hasn't. My training does not change at all when I drop into a deficit. You have to be a little bit more mindful of certain things, and I guess I shouldn't say it doesn't change at all. There are certain aspects of it that change somewhat, but they're very minor. I'm not changing my rep scheme, my weights. I'm not arbitrarily just saying, okay, now I'm in a deficit, I'm dropping weight off and doing more volume or doing less volume and increasing the weight or anything weird like that. All that I do to change my training coming from a growth phase into a deficit is drop any intensifiers. So whereas in a growth phase, we probably have intensifiers in place like drop sets, rest pause sets, things of that nature. Those get removed within the first few weeks of a deficit. They don't always get removed right away. It's usually just within that first few week period. And then sometimes if needed, if my recovery isn't there, we might pull a set or two back from some of the higher volume days just to kind of give my body a little bit more recovery capacity in between those sessions without as much food in play. So that's really it. There's not like this huge switch up of things. You don't need to change your training. In fact, it's not beneficial to change your training when you drop into a deficit. And the reason I say it's not beneficial is if you have a baseline during your growth phase, your maintenance phase, whatever it is before you drop into a deficit, and you've established this baseline, you don't want to go and change all of the metrics that you would measure your performance baseline by. So if my baseline is, for my chest day, let's just say it's 3 sets with 100 pounds on the flat bench 10 reps each set. And then I can monitor that baseline over the entire growth phase and monitor, hey, I added this much weight, this many reps, I improved my form this week, so on and so forth. I have metrics that I can measure my improvement or my lack of progress, my regression by. But when I change that, let's say I drop into a deficit and I'm like, I don't want to do flat bench anymore because I don't want to injure a pec. Let's just do a bench press machine. Well, now it's a completely different ball game. We're using different metrics and different standards that we haven't familiarized ourselves with over the course of the growth phase or the previous phase, whatever that may be, coming into this deficit. So it just doesn't really help you track things. In fact, it doesn't help, it only hurts. And something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it kind of is, I have a rant about, I guess. People who want to prioritize this discussion of what's better, volume or intensity? Should I lift with more intensity or should I lift with more volume? It doesn't fucking matter. I think it's such a redundant point. I will never understand why people have that discussion, because at the end of the day, all that matters for you as a bodybuilder, within the context of bodybuilding, which is where all my discussions happen, what we are trying to do is elicit a growth response, as I just said. And we're only trying to elicit a growth response. That's all we need. So there's not really a point where intensity versus volume becomes super relevant, because it doesn't need to be. It's whatever works for you to better align yourself with generating a stimulus to the muscle within a session that you can recover from. And it's hyper individualized. That's why you see some guys who have excelled off of this very, I don't want to say lightweight, I don't think lightweight is ever the correct term, but this higher volume, lower intensity kind of training style, and then guys who have also excelled with this crazy high intensity style. The reason they both work is because both can be viable. It's honestly just personal preference and what works for you within the context of yourself and your own self-growth. And that is what makes bodybuilding such a unique sport. And I think that's what people are missing in the context of training when they're having this discussion, is this is an individualized sport. Bodybuilding is about you, and it should be about you beating yourself, nobody else. Yes, when you get up on stage, there's a competitive aspect, but you get better on stage by besting and bettering yourself every single day. And it doesn't really matter how you do that, as long as those results end up happening. And obviously people want to have this discussion because they want to figure out how to drive those results for themselves. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer for that in a lot of cases. More so, it's just, well, trial and error. And what do you like to do? That's another big component of it, because if I hated going in and training like Dorian every day and just cranking fucking weight, but that's what I forced myself to do, I'd probably very easily and relatively quickly fall out of love with bodybuilding, because it's not something that I enjoy doing anymore. I dread having to do that type of a routine. And I'm not saying I personally do, but just using that as an example. I think that that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they try to find this quote unquote optimal pathway for them to progress, and they end up hyper fixating on the minutia of training, of diets, of whatever, when the reality is bodybuilding is the easiest fucking sport out there. As long as you have halfway decent genetics, it just means you train with high intensity. This doesn't mean weight-based intensity. I'm not saying high weight or anything, but you train with close proximity to failure, put all your fucking effort into it, you take a lot of time to rest and recover, your nutrition is locked in, and you do that for months, years at a time. That's all it takes. And then people want to overcomplicate this, I think, because they can sell you on something. I think when you have a lot of these discussions come up, it's because someone is trying to sell you on their way of doing things, because they're marketing something to you. And I think that that's also another thing, especially with the fitness industry being how it is, that gets lost on people, where they don't realize, or they're not aware that they're being marketed to. Yes, you have guys on YouTube who are like, do, RPE 8 and then RPE 9 the next week, and then, periodize your volume. And fuck all that. That's a marketing ploy to get you to buy in to their interpretation of a scientific study. And at the end of the day, that can only be so useful. You have to balance this mindset of science-based lifting, or whatever you want to call it. I call them book lifters, because that's all they can fucking lift, first of all. And second of all, that's about all they want to lift. They're trying to do the least possible, and yet they want these crazy results. But these book lifters, they aren't going to get anywhere just trying to replicate studies in the real world. You have to realize that this is a sport that has been, in a lifestyle that has been built on years and years and years of, yes, some studies, but mostly anecdotal, real-world implementation. We can take studies and look at them for a very isolated reference point and say, well, maybe we can try something with this. But at the end of the day, we still have to apply principles that we know work anecdotally and from personal experience. A lot of fucking effort over a long period of time with insanely good consistency. And in part, just really fucking good genetics. I think a lot of people want to discount that or believe it doesn't exist. Conversely, there are also some people who are hyper fixated on that and say, oh, it's all genetics. Why even try? It's like, well, yeah, why fucking do anything? Why try and get a nice job? Because clearly there's a guy who's going to inherit money from his fucking parents or is a Nepo baby and is making billions more than you. So why even get a job? Overall, I think my point that I'm trying to get across here is you don't need to hyper fixate on these small things. People need to realize that focusing on these little things is not going to give you half of the progress you're expecting, when the reality is you could just focus on the bigger things and do a better job of executing on those bigger principles and see greater results. Now, on that note, I am just about at the gym, so I'm going to cut this off, hop into the session, and yeah, you guys will see some push training for the day.
All right, so getting into the first movement for the day, this is my flat bench variant that I'm doing currently. This is I think it's M Torture wide chest press, I believe it's called. Love this thing. I actually really like their standard flat chest press as well. That kind of has some rotating handles that you grab with like a pronated grip instead of a neutral grip, but I've maxed that out. So I can't really use that anymore. So move to this one, really liking this one now too, kind of tweaked the setup for it over the past few weeks, and I'm really happy with this. Great base movement to start the day with, obviously just a good flat bench before moving into my incline bench, which is again another new tech piece. Obviously this is a Torture gym in Vegas, which is now my home gym, and all of their equipment is new tech equipment. Some of it is their M Torture line, some of it's just more their basic line. Not sure of all the details, but I know they are kind of separated out a little bit. Anyways, here, this is my incline. Also played with this over the past couple weeks and very happy with how this is looking and how this feels. Actually took a weight decrease here over the past couple weeks just because I felt like I was pushing this up a little bit too quickly. But now everything is feeling good and I'm really happy with just the full range of motion and how this is feeling as far as a connection goes, which is the most important thing in my opinion when it comes to bodybuilding training. Now, next movement. Standard pec deck chest fly. The reason I use this one is it better aligns the angle of force with the pec fibers over some of the other pec decks out there, and more specifically the new tech kind of chest fly machine that has a downward angle. It still feels very good and I really do like that machine. Sometimes I will still use it, but if you're talking about biomechanics, this standard pec deck is just kind of the best way to go, purely because it is going to, like I said, align that line of force with the pec fibers to more optimally stimulate that muscle. I hate that word, but ultimately that is the reason why we're deciding to do this over a different fly variant at an angle. Okay, so not a lot to say about this one. This is just a standard standing lateral raise. Actually, maybe I have more to say here than I thought. So I guess on this, something you'll notice me doing is doing this one arm at a time. And you'll notice that I kind of rotate my torso inward so that that non-dominant arm, or the arm that I'm not currently lifting with, is a little bit closer. This allows me to get just a better angle to actually target that side delt on the side that I am working. And that's the benefit you have here when it comes to working these unilaterally or working this movement unilaterally versus bilaterally. You can still get good work in on this bilaterally if you're pressed for time and you need to do it bilaterally just to keep session time down. But my push day is already my shortest day of the week, so I was able to just add these in unilateral rather than doing the bilateral, and it feels much more effective. You'll get a little bit of a better view here on this right hand side with kind of how I angle my body and also how I'm trying to come up as far as possible. And I could probably do a little bit of a better job here, but removing that momentum at both the top end and the bottom end of the range, keeping a slow control of the weight throughout the entire movement, not just tossing the weight up with my entire body. You know, those last couple reps on each side, obviously you're going to have a little bit of that. That's just how it's going to be. You're going to have a tiny little bit of form breakdown if you're really pushing yourself hard enough, but nothing we're concerned with that's actually causing issues. Okay, now getting into my bilateral tricep extension. I go back and forth some weeks doing this unilaterally and then bilaterally, where I'll do like unilateral for 3-4 weeks and then switch back to bilateral. Lately, I've really been enjoying the bilateral movement over the unilateral, which is not the usual case. Normally, I prefer unilateral, but I feel like I'm just connecting a lot better with the bilateral movement right now, and I couldn't honestly tell you why. It just feels really productive to me, so I've been doing them this way. And the plus side there is that it saves me a little bit of time in my session, so that's nice. But you'll see here, I am just focusing on coming pretty far up to get a good stretch on that tricep, and then really controlling that weight as I come down to the side and driving through that tricep to stretch as much as possible. All right, and last movement for this session is going to be my overhead tricep extension machine. This is a machine I didn't have access to before that I now have access to here at Torture Gym, and I fucking love this machine. Awesome machine. I wildly prefer this to single arm overhead tricep extensions. I just personally feel like I get a much better connection on this machine. I don't know if it's just the setup for it. I don't know if it's because I can brace and sit on it. Whatever it is, it feels really fucking good to me. So love this machine. It's just really fucking heavy. I think you'll notice I have, what is it, about 15 kilos. So like 35 pounds or something like that on the machine here. All the plates at this gym are in kilograms. But yeah, not a lot of weight needed to get a good stimulus there. And that is going to be it for this session, guys. So if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will catch you in the next one.